What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's the Game Week 2 preview. So we're going to go through some of the questions and topics that you've put to me and also do a bit of a Q&A at the end as well. So we should touch on a broad range of subjects in this one ahead of Game Week 2. I am recording it slightly in advance. I'm recording on Wednesday evening just because I'm not going to be around to post it otherwise. So if there is anything major, I will try and fix it before the video goes out. But it should be good. There's a lot of stuff covered. It should all be useful info as we go into Game Week 2. So give it a like if you enjoy it, hit that subscribe button if you're new around here, and let's quickly talk about Fantasy Football Scout. So it's a really good time to be using the members area now. If you want to sign up for it, there is a link in the description below. You can pay monthly or yearly, however you want to do it. But because now the season's started, we've obviously started to get some data for this season, right, from the first game week, and that will continue to add up throughout the season. So one thing, for example, is the Rate My Team tool, and rather than building your team all the time now, you can just put your ID in here. Mine is 2. It tells you on screen how to do that. So once you're in there, if you don't know how to get your FPL ID, it will show you how to do that. And I can just click go, and then it brings up my team as it is. And then I can start making changes. So Gundogan is someone we're going to talk about in this video. If I wanted to add, say, Mason Greenwood, for example, I could put him in, and then it would show me what my updated score is based on the next few weeks by putting Greenwood in instead. And I can chop and change based on different players, right? So that's one cool thing. The other one is the stats table. So now my stats tables are all updated, so I can see all the data from the first game week, and obviously that will build up for game week 2, 3, 4. And once we get halfway through the season, you can look back at last 4 game weeks, last 6 game weeks. There's so much stuff in it, right? Make sure to check it out. There's the Fantasy Football Scout Transfer Planner, which you can request as well. Loads of tools, really will be handy for you throughout this season, so make sure to give it a go. Link in the description below if you want to get signed up, and like I said, you can pay for it monthly or yearly. So this is actually a bit of a coincidence. The member stuff I just talked about, obviously I needed to put in the video, but Fantasy Football Scout also do a bunch of free articles as well, and one of the ones they've done today was talking about the international break potential chaos, right? I'm adding the drama there about the chaos, but I spoke about this on my deadline stream, how players are being called up to kind of South America, and because of the quarantine rules and the lateness of the matches they're playing, they might not be back in time for game week 4, and if they do have to isolate under current rules, they could miss game week 5 as well. So I won't go through this whole article. You can go and check it out. There's loads of members articles as well, by the way, if you wanted to sign up, like I said just a minute ago. But you can see here just how late the games are. So they basically finish early Friday morning. Then games are on kind of Saturday and Sunday. And then here are the players that could be affected. So you got Martinez, Aston Villa, Chelsea, Thiago Silva, Everton is Richarlison. These are just some of the bigger names we should be worried about. Rafinha at Leeds is a big one. Alisson, Fabinho, that's big for the defence of Liverpool, and Firmino as well, which could mean that Jota gets a bit of extra minutes. Fred and Cavani at Man United, and so there's stuff to think about, right? And there's been reports on kind of Liverpool Echo about other Liverpool players that Salah could miss out, for example. So we need to take a think or a look at it, or basically consider this, and then what does that mean for our teams going forward? So they must quarantine in a managed quarantine hotel for 10 full days from the point of their arrival. The day of arrival in England will be treated as day 0. There's dozens of nations on the red list, including all the South American countries listed above, plus numerous in Africa and Asia, right? So it goes on to say, it's a situation well worth monitoring as well, along with the myriad of South American players we've already named. The likes of Mo Salah, Raul Jimenez, and potentially even Mikel Antonio could be caught up in the drama, because basically they're going to go and play in countries that are red listed. So when they come back, there's loads, right? I'm not going to go through all these. Now the question is, should we massively change our thinking right now? Probably not. The Premier League, the FA, whoever it might be, FIFA, they might come to an arrangement where these players, if they test negative, they don't have to quarantine for so much, so they can go back and play for their teams. But when we looked at it on the deadline stream, this isn't one of those things they can just veto like the Olympics. This is a FIFA event, it's FIFA internationals, and so the clubs have to release them. All the rules about not having to do that because of COVID, they've kind of all stopped now. It doesn't mean that the players will definitely go, or the clubs won't try to stop it, but I'm not sure they will. Players like Rafinha, it's their first call up to the Brazil squad. They're going to want to go and play. So we need to see how this plays out. It is frustrating that we don't have concrete info right now about exactly who might miss out, because it would change our transfer plans. Salah, for example, plays Chelsea in game week 3, and then if he misses game week 4, and then potentially game week 5, I guess, if he has to quarantine for 10 days, then that's a sale. We should be selling Salah and getting someone else in, spending that money, even if it means getting Salah back at a later date. So my advice right now, or my opinion on this is, we don't panic too much. We keep playing as normal and potentially don't bring in too many of these players. Just make sure that our squad's not full of players that could miss out, because then it gets tricky and we might be forced into an early wild card. But we don't have to panic. We don't have to start thinking about selling Mo Salah just yet. But keep this in the back of your mind. More and more this plays out, the more info we get every single week, I'll make sure to talk about it. But realistically, we might not find out till kind of the end of next week, just before the Game Week 3 deadline, perhaps even afterwards, exactly what's going to happen. But I don't think many of these players are going to refuse to go, and I don't think the clubs are going to be able to stop them being called up. So yeah, as it says there, the likes of Diogo Jota if Firmino goes, the likes of Greenwood if Cavani's there and has to self-isolate when he gets back, they could be really good basically it's a good thing for them because they'll get more minutes. So it's not just about players that are going to miss out, it's about players that might get more minutes. So Greenwood, for example, looks good for the next few weeks. So potential chaos incoming, we'll just have to keep our eye on it. So there was a few questions around premium options, right? And I'm kind of coming to this from two different angles. In some ways, I like that people are planning and they're thinking about possible transfers they might have to make, even if that includes selling Mo Salah, selling Bruno Fernandes, right? Never say never. Season keepers in my eyes don't exist. If the time is right, you can sell a big hitter like Salah, like Bruno Fernandes. It doesn't mean that you can't buy them back, and it doesn't mean that it will be for more than just a couple of weeks, but you can do it. So I like that people are thinking about it, but I also think too many people are panicking, right? Last season, the season before, we say it all the time, you cannot have everyone. And when everyone on this list is priced 10.5 or more, and realistically, I think most people are kind of looking at everyone else apart from Vardy, right? So we're looking at Kane if he goes to Man City. Arguably, Kane is a better option if he stays at Spurs because of the short-term fixtures, if he's going to be available. Lukaku now at Chelsea, there's a panic, right? How do I get them in? Should I sell Bruno Fernandes? Should I sell Mo Salah? The thing is, what's easy to almost forget, or what it seems to be forgotten a lot, is Mo Salah and Bruno Fernandes are really, 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 really good FPL options, right? They're really good. They've got good fixtures. They're good captains for the foreseeable future, at least for the next kind of 3 to 4 weeks. We don't have to be panicking about replacing them with a new shiny toy. Lukaku apparently is going to come in and play against Arsenal straight away. Fair enough. But then he plays Liverpool. And then in Game Week 5, he plays Spurs. So it's a tricky run to start. We don't know what formation they'll play. Will he play on his own? Will he play off someone? Will Havertz play in a 2 with him? We don't know. Will he have penalties? Possibly not. Jorginho and Mount were the one with the kind of the designating penalty takers last year. So there's lots of question marks about Lukaku. De Bruyne got 10 minutes. I think it was 11 maybe minutes in the first game week. Is he going to be fit and available to start against Norwich? If he does, arguably, he's a really good captain opportunity. But who wants to take that risk right now? And then it's Arsenal, and then it's Leicester. Southampton's a good fixture. And look, I'm not sitting here telling you that Man City cannot score plenty of goals against Arsenal and Leicester, because they can. They're the best team in the league, right? But I don't know if there's a worry about not owning De Bruyne right now. Kane is apparently now getting sessions under his belt, training for Spurs. They're still talk that Man City are going to come back with a bigger bid for him. Like I said, if you look at the fixtures between De Bruyne and Kane, if Kane was going to start the next 3, and I talk about this all the time, if you want a differential that's not being differential for the sake of it, then Harry Kane, captain against Watford at home, if he's still at Spurs and we know that he's going to play, that's a huge call, right? So we could look at going for him. But ultimately, I feel like most of this is just a bit of a panic. I've got Salah or Fernandes. That's a bit boring. Everyone's got them. Should I sell to Lukaku? And right now, I would say no. If you've got Salah and Fernandes, in my eyes, there's not really too much reason to move off them. Obviously, I've just talked about the international break potential chaos. And if that happens, like I've just said, if Salah is out for Game Week 4, Game Week 5, and has got Chelsea in Game Week 3, then yeah, there's a good reason to sell him, because you can use that money probably better for a big hitter that doesn't have those problems, isn't going to have to quarantine, and potentially has good fixtures, right? But you don't really need to worry about it right now. He's got Burnley at home, and then we reassess. Fernandes has got Southampton at home, Wolves away, Newcastle at home. Good fixtures. He doesn't need to be sold. I'm not against getting ahead of the curve, because I think when it comes to big hitters, they are usually the players that if you can get on them early enough, you do get ahead of the crowd. Maybe you force them into a price rise and everyone else finds it more difficult to get to them. You'll always have those people that just don't want to sell Salah and Fernandes, so you can get an edge. I'm just not really sure the fixture's there unless Kane's at Spurs, because De Bruyne I just wouldn't trust to get a good amount of minutes against Norwich. Jamie Vardy's okay, but West Ham and Man City are not great fixtures, and I just don't like Chelsea's fixtures all that much. We all know about the Chelsea fixture swing in Game Week 7. It's okay to wait on a play. You don't have to get them straight away. So all the questions about should I swap Salah, Fernandes down to a different player so that I can get Lukaku, Kane, etc. As it stands right now, ahead of Game Week 2, I'm not worried about that at all. But yes, in the future, we will probably be looking at that. So I guess possibly, inevitably, people are now, I don't think there's much panic, but they're thinking about whether to get a Man City player because it's Norwich at home, right? That's a juicy fixture. Doesn't matter how badly that Man City played against Spurs, right, and how few goals they scored, i.e. 0, and obviously they lost to Leicester in the Community Shield as well. This is a great fixture. No one would bat an eyelid if they put 5 or 6 goals against Norwich. I'm not saying they will, but they definitely have the potential to do that. Fixtures-wise, just really quickly before we talk about the players, they're not the worst fixtures, right? I wouldn't back against Man City scoring in the next 2. Then they've got Southampton, so they're quite good. But there's always going to be a rotation concern, and some managers don't care about that. They like to take the risk, and fair enough, if that's how you play, keep listing, but some don't, right? And Chelsea and Liverpool in Game Week 5 and 6 aren't that great either. So I already own Mahrez, but I guess the question is, I think it came in actually from FPL Strategist, if you didn't have a Man City player, who would you bring in? And I've got Mahrez, and I still feel like it probably would be Mahrez, because I think he's at a price point where people can probably get to him. And I think he's not necessarily that he's the most likely to start out of this list, although I do think he's probably quite high up on it. It's just that his numbers are so good. He is going to play in that front 3. I would assume, and you can always be wrong when it comes to Man City, there's going to be a fairly similar team that played against Spurs, because I don't think they're going to have gotten too many other players back. De Bruyne only Pep basically said that De Bruyne hadn't even started, couldn't complete full training session. Then all of a sudden he's on the bench, and then he's playing 11 minutes. So I don't know if he's going to be available for the next game. If he is, there's a couple of positions that he could come into. Either the number 9 and Torres moves somewhere else, possibly to the bench, or if Gundogan is definitely out, which at the time recording I still don't know for sure, then he could play in that number 8 position and Torres keeps his place up front. So it could be Sterling, Torres, Mahrez, front 3. Similar to how it was in the first game against Spurs. And then you'd have the 2 8s, Grealish and De Bruyne, and then Fernandinho or Rodri behind, right? And if De Bruyne misses out, it gets a little bit trickier, because all the talk is that Bernardo Silva either wants to go, or Pep wants him gone, or Man City want him gone. So would they risk using him? And if they don't, they are a bit stuck in that kind of central position. Either they have to bring maybe one of the young kids in, or they play with 2 defensive midfielders, so play with both Fernandinho and Rodri, and then perhaps play Grealish just in front. But he's never really done that, I don't think, too much, at least recently. And it does feel a bit defensive when you're playing Norwich. So even now, I'm talking, there's question marks about who starts and where do they start. The reason I'm kind of put off Grealish a little bit is he did play in that number 8 position, and you want him kind of playing on the left, I think, which he did go into later on in the game, but there's no guarantee that he's going to start there. It's not that I even really see him being the assister of the assister or anything like that. I just don't think his goal threat is going to be that high at Man City. I just don't think that's his game. It wasn't at Aston Villa. I don't see why it would be here. So you are probably mostly looking at assists, which do kind of add up. But I think Mahrez or Torres are probably a bit more interesting. The problem is then, even if they start against Norwich, what's their prospects going forward? I still think, and I might sell him soon, I still think Mahrez is probably looking okay for Arsenal, Leicester possibly, and maybe even Southampton, because they could play Torres on that right-hand side. Foden's obviously out. Sterling's mostly going to play on the left. So it's not a given, and you'd probably want to see a slightly better performance from Mahrez. But I do feel fairly confident, about as much confidence you can have in a Man City player, at least for the next couple of game weeks. Ultimately, here's what I would say. If you've not got a Man City player and they were never in your plans, don't go for him, I don't think, because you're going to bring him in. If you didn't go for him from the start, you probably didn't plan, and he's probably not your type of player where you've got someone with a minute's risk. And so if you weren't going to go for them anyway, just leave them out. It doesn't matter, because as soon as you put them in for Norwich, whether they blank or not, you're going to start thinking about getting rid of them straight away. For those of you that started with them, then brilliant. But yeah, De Bruyne captain would be amazing if we knew he was going to start. I think he's a genuinely huge captain option, but we just can't guarantee that. So Mahrez is still my favourite. I think he's more likely to get your goal than Grealish. Sterling, I just think he's too expensive to worry about at this stage of the season. And Torres is decent if he starts. So keep an eye out for predicted lineups, but it's difficult. You just don't know. But Torres at 7 million is just as good as Mahrez, I think, when they both play. Okay, so a few questions now that came in as well. Thoughts on going with cheap defenders only? Never really tried that, but intrigued to see if it could work in the long run. one. So potentially it could work, right? We are going to get to a stage where you're going to want 3 premiums, whoever it is. I'm not going to go through them all again, but let's say you've got Salah and Fernandes already. You might want to add a Kane, or you might want to add a Lukaku. And the easiest way to do that is to strip the money out of your defence, right? So maybe you downgrade, I don't know, Trent Alexander-Arnold to a Van Dijk, or maybe you go a little bit lower to like just having like Luke Shaw as your most expensive defender, then a bunch of 4.5s. That is potentially an option, but I don't know if we need to be worrying about that right now. What is the reason to be cheapening your defence down? The things to consider are there were a lot of 4 million defenders that started in game week 1 and could potentially play moving forward. So Livramento at Southampton probably looks like the most likely to keep his place. Duffy potentially up until Dan Burn's back. Hoover at Wolves, we'll have to see over the next couple of weeks if he keeps starting. But if one of those starts, or maybe even 2, you could potentially go for 2 4s and really cheapen it down. Maybe go for 2 4.5s as well, and then a 5.5 or a 6 is your most expensive defender. Can that work? That's going to depend on when we go for it, right? Right now, I've got no intentions, for example, of selling Trent Alexander-Arnold because the fixtures are just so good. But if we get to a stage where the fixtures are really good for kind of 2 to 3 premiums and I want them all at once, I'm not against doing that. The only thing is, it's a big call to do. And if you haven't already started like that, I don't think it's worth the transfers to get to that position just yet. And I also don't think it's worth a wildcard, because once you wildcard into that, it's very difficult to then put all the money back in. You can do it slowly, or you can do it with a lot of hits, but you can't do it quickly, right, without the hits. So if you had like 2 4s, 2 4.5s, and then like a Luke Shaw, and you suddenly want to get a couple of 6s in now, you want to get Van Dijk or Trent or Robertson, whoever it is, that's a lot of money to be moving about. So can it work? Yes, there was a stage last season where I sold Trent for Chilwell. I think he was 5.5, and he would have probably then been my most expensive defender. And then Trent got injured a couple of weeks later. So for ages, none of us really had an expensive Liverpool defender. And obviously Van Dijk was injured, but that's not the case necessarily this year. So keep an open mind. It is possible to do that, especially if all your attackers are doing really well. But I don't see a big reason right now to completely overhaul your team to get to that point. So a few questions around Sancho. This one from FPL Gunner. Thoughts on Sancho? Simply, I feel that with him potentially coming into the starting lineup this weekend and hopefully the weeks after, he could be a great differential to take advantage of United's attack and their fixtures, right? So I don't disagree. I absolutely want to see him start before I go for it. Again, you could be a more aggressive manager and assume that he's going to start this weekend. Man United have got good fixtures that we've spoken about, like Greenwood, for example, is a great option, Fernandes, etc. We know that because they've got good fixtures. So you could just go for him straight away. I'd like to see him play first. Where exactly does he play? How does he fit into that system? How much goal threat? How often is he getting into the box? Is he more of a creator? But I have thought about it myself. Over the next couple of weeks, there'll be people with Mahrez, maybe people with Son, wanting to move players on. I think Sancho has got the pedigree from the Bundesliga to show that he can do that in the Premier League. But for some of us, we're going to want to see him kind of at least, I don't know, get his first return or whatever it might be. But FPL is all about predictions. So if you think he's going to hit the ground running and start next week in game week 2, then absolutely there's no real reason you couldn't go for it. And he is in a price position where you could swap into a few other midfielders later on as well. Potentially Son being one of them. If you had 0.5 more, you could downgrade to Havertz in game week 7, however long you want to hold him on for. So I agree. I'd be surprised if he doesn't start next week, although I don't think it's guaranteed. And I think he's going to do well. So as a punt, I really don't hate it. But again, we're only in game week 2. You don't really need to make rash decisions. So if you're not sure, there is no harm in waiting. So I absolutely missed this out before getting into the Q&A. So I'll tuck this in somewhere in between the Q&A questions. Gundogan replacement. So I've talked about this quite a lot, I feel like, already this week, because I'm in a position where I will probably sell him this week. I don't know if he's definitely missing Norwich again at the time of recording, but my feeling is that he will. He will probably miss Norwich, and he was only a short-term option for me anyway. These 6 players seem to be the ones that most people are looking at, and I can't really massively disagree with them. There aren't too many other players at 7.5. I wouldn't be bringing Jota in right now, personally, and Pogba's obviously gone up in price as well. And yes, if you've got more money to spend, you can go to a Mahrez or a Son, then perfect, go for them. But right now we're looking at players that are as expensive, if not cheaper. So I like Greenwood. There's a lot of discussion on Twitter this week about whether he's nailed. I think for game weeks 2 to 4, you're probably fine. Cavani's not up to full fitness yet. Neither's Martial. Sancho's only just starting to, obviously we just discussed, maybe getting into the team. So I think Greenwood will be fine. Plus, he was really good against Leeds. So Southampton, Wolves, Newcastle, you can just target them and then reassess afterwards. If he keeps his place, brilliant. There's another few good games after that. If not, you can move him on. So for 7.5, I like Greenwood. You need to think about what your future transfers are going to be. Because some people are going to ask me about Son. Should we get in Son? Well, yeah, I think he's a good option for the next 3. Maybe you could bring him in game week 3 or 4 instead for his couple of good fixtures there, possibly as a captain option. But then you need to look at your own team. How are you going to bring him in? How much money do you need? And that's potentially where you look at some of these other options. So Rafinha, Sarr, Harrison, Benrahma and Mbeumo as well. I actually quite like the look of Mbeumo because he's 5.5. So you take a lot of money out of that position. If you had Gundogan in there, you're saving 2 million. Palace and Villa are really nice fixtures. Brighton and Wolves are not as easy, I would say, but they're not really difficult either. And then you could potentially look to move him on or just use him as an enabler, keep him in there. Again, I was chatting to a Brentford fan earlier. They think no matter what formation they play, whether it's 3-5-2 or 4-3-3, he's going to be in an attacking position. He's not going to be playing right wing back, which he has done last season before at times. So in the 3-5-2, he's playing as like another striker. And we saw against Arsenal, he got in behind quite a lot, right? It was to the point where Tony was playing him in. Or if they play 4-3-3, it'd be as the right winger. So a bit like, Mahrez, Salah position. And he's still going to be attacking. So I quite like the punt there. And I'm not completely against doubling up with Tony because I think Brentford are going to do okay. The only issue when you double up with teams is that obviously, when the fixtures turn, they turn for both players, right? Because they're from the same team. That's obvious. And if you've got cheap players and no money to move them on, you might feel like you're a bit stuck with them. So that's one thing to consider. Benrahma, as I've said all week, my main issue is what if they sign Lingard? I think as a short-term option, Leicester, Palace, Southampton, they're not bad fixtures. But if Lingard signs, I feel like Benrahma is then a big minutes issue. Harrison's decent. I think he's solid. Not many people talk about him, but he's a solid player last year. He's going to get regular starts. His numbers are pretty good. Everton, Burnley, Newcastle next 4 is decent. And you don't have those worries like you do with Rafinha about possibly having to isolate and stuff like that. I do think Rafinha is probably... I actually think if all things are equal, minutes and fixtures, I think Rafinha is the best player on this list. I said that pre-season that I never went for him, but I don't know. There's just those concerns over game week 4 and 5 might slightly put me off. With Sarr, I love the fixtures from game week 4 onwards for at least I think it's 3 or 4 weeks afterwards. Game weeks 2 and 3, Brighton and Spurs, they're not great. I wouldn't be massively surprised if he came away with nothing, but he is so integral to that side. He is going to play 90 minutes that he can get you something out of nothing. So I don't hate him as a pick either. But basically, from Rafinha down, they're kind of all enablers. So you kind of take your pick. If you want someone in for the long term where you don't have to mess with, then Mbeumo, Harrison, Rafinha and Sarr, they're going to start most weeks, right? Benrahma is the one I'd be a little bit concerned about. If you want a 90-minute man, then it's got to be Sarr. And I think his fixtures, if you think that Brighton and Spurs are okay, his fixtures are kind of good until game week 7 or 8, so you then don't have to worry about him. So that's what I'd be thinking about. How many more times do you want to change this spot? With Greenwood, it could be after game week 4 that you're then reassessing. And how much money do you need for future moves? That's who I'd be looking at. So I don't really have a standout for those reasons, right? I've just talked through my feelings about those players. But I don't think any player on this list is a bad option. Okay, so another question would be an interesting discussion about home away advantage with fans back, who benefits the most and whether we should take it into consideration. Ties in well with captaincy pick with Salah at Anfield this game week. So captaincy I'll discuss tomorrow in the captaincy video, but yes, Salah is right up there for obvious reasons. So as a general rule, I don't massively make my decisions based on home and away. Not my kind of big decisions about whether a fixture run looks good or not, right? I'm not really... bringing it down to home and away. If I see Southampton and I see Newcastle and I see Brentford, Norwich, I don't care if it's home or away. I think that's a good fixture, right? There is a home advantage. I think it's been proved quite a lot. I follow a lot of analytics people on FPL. I think there was one analytic, FPL Simon. I think he said it's about 28%. This is why I don't discuss these things. 20%. I think it was 28% increase more on goals at home. So there is an advantage. There is a home advantage. But again, if I see Norwich, Brentford, etc., I don't care if it's home or away, I'm liking the look of those players. Where I might use it is possibly for clean sheets potential. If a player's at home and there's more goals scored at home, that would say there's less goals scored away, so the team is less likely to score, and possibly with close captaincy decisions as well. So if you were like, we're going to discuss Salah and Bruno. For me, one of those is more likely to get you a goal, and the other one just isn't. And so therefore, that would probably swing it to Salah for me anyway. But I'll discuss that more tomorrow. But also, he is at home. So if you really were stuck between the two, then yeah, you probably just go for the guy at home. But in general, it's not massively what I think about. I still rather look at the players' individual stats, the team individual stats, and both attacking and defensive. And I don't really necessarily boil it down to home and away, because the problem you have then, especially when you're looking at stats for a particular season, like the one we're in, is you're getting less of a sample size, right? Because if you've got 10 matches, but then you boil it down to home only, you might only have 5 matches to look at, and then that's a small data sample size. So I don't tend to look at it that much, but for close calls, that's when I might look at it. And yes, I would favour the home team most of the time. So I think this question was a little bit sarcastic, but should we stop playing the fixtures at last and look at the stats? Yeah, Danny, I'm talking to you with non-penalty expected goals. So I'm pretty sure that's Danny Ings that had 0 shots in the first game week, right? So first of all, and again, I know a lot of the conversation from me this week has been just, don't panic, it's only one game. But that's absolutely correct, right? It's only been one game. Danny Ings could have 5 shots in the box in the next game, score a couple of goals. They were absolutely laughing. What I would say on the broader conversation with stats is we should always play the fixtures and we should play the stats as well. It doesn't have to be one or the other. Like eye test or stats and fixtures or form. Like it's all rubbish. Just use it all, right? You don't have to just use one. I don't know why FPL managers kind of box themselves into just one way of playing. So I would be looking at, like right now, I will take notice of stuff that happens in single games, but I won't completely change my opinion about a player. So Kieran Tierney, 2 shots in the box, I think it was, and 6 chances created. That's pretty big, right? I like him, but at the same time, I already know what Arsenal defensive stats are like for last season, how they're likely to perform this year. I already know that Kieran Tierney's attacking, so it doesn't really change my mind. Calvert-Lewin, 5 shots in the box. Brilliant. That's Calvert-Lewin. He's a really good striker. And he's got good fixtures. So those things don't change my mind. And Danny Ings not having any shots. The only thing that does is frustrates me as a non-owner that he got a penalty in the 97th minute. But it is what it is. So right now, I would be looking at stats from last year and applying them to fixtures for this year and just running from there. After a few game weeks, yeah, we can start looking at if there's any trends, but you don't want to make too many decisions based off just this one game week, right? I'm telling you now, I guarantee you next week, we're talking about a whole host of different problems. Danny Ings has scored 2 goals from open play, Mason Greenwood's blanked or whatever, Mahrez has hopefully scored a hat-trick, and suddenly all the questions will be different. I'll be saying to you, well, it's only 2 game weeks, we've still got another one to go next week, then let's see. So yeah, stats are good, fixtures are good, use them both together. Okay, so this is a good question, right? It's more about strategy. Lots of managers are talking about rolling a free transfer this week, which they absolutely should. Would you still roll if you had a plan to get a player in game week 3 who is now due to rise in price? So that's a good question. And if they had a good fixture as well in game week 2, I would think about it. I really would try and not take a hit if you can help it. But if that's a player that you definitely wanted in game week 3 and you won't be able to afford it because they're going to go up in price, and then from game week 3 onwards, they got a pretty good fixture. And basically what I'm saying is if they're a long-term hold, then yeah, I would definitely consider it. If you've got like a buffer, so let's say they're 0.5 million more expensive and you've got $1 million to spend, and they're going to go up 0.1, so it's a bit frustrating because you'll only have 0.4 left, but you're not in dire need of doing the move, then I would possibly try to hold off. But in general, I'm not against playing a little bit more aggressive at the start of the season to get those price rises. And I'm not completely against a hit either, right? So if you were set on a player for game week 3 and the only way to do it is take a hit in game week 2, yes, it's not great to have to take a hit so early, but if it doesn't price you out of a move that you definitely wanted to do anyway, I don't see a big issue. What I wouldn't be doing, which someone else asked me, is making transfers just to get price rises. Because yes, it's nice to have extra team value later on in the season, but points right now also matter too. So there's a couple of players on my list that I'm thinking about getting, and I am very much keeping an eye on the price sites like FPL Statistics and going from there. But most of the time you want to roll a transfer. I actually wrote an article for 888 Sport, which I'll put in the description, and one of the things I spoke about was kind of not using chips and trying to roll a transfer if you can. So I absolutely would do that, but make sure you give that a read because I talked about some of the things in here as well. But yeah, this is definitely something that you want to consider not doing, but if you're going to be priced out completely, you could just go for it. So there we go. That is it for this one. I feel like we covered a lot. If there's anything that I missed, do leave a comment below. Anything you disagree with, agree with, let me know what you think about that video. Do give it a like if you enjoyed it and hit that subscribe button. Let's get to 250k by the end of the season. Obviously, if you haven't checked out Fantasy Football Scout, make sure you do. Link in the description below. You can sign up yearly, you can pay for it monthly, but it really is a handy, I would say tool, but there's so many tools on there. It's a great place to be a member of. I've been using it for 10, 11 years now, ever since I started playing fantasy football. So I'd highly recommend it. Link in the description below. Big thank you to everyone that signed up to Patreon. We've had some more new recruits now since the last video, so big up to you. Kumar T, Matab S, apologies if I mispronounce any of these, Marco G and Cameron M, who have all signed up. Link in the description below to that if you want to check out what it's all about. And like I said, my 888 Sport article, which I've written, is in the description below. I'll leave it there. Please do give it a like, hit that subscribe button, and I'll be back tomorrow with hopefully 2 videos, but definitely captaincy and then deadline stream on Saturday. I'll see you then.